Recently on Facebook and Reddit and different places, I see a lot of people worrying about changing the game with Marvel Champions. And I think a part of this is because a lot of people getting into Marvel Champions are from the board game space and not the TCG space. And that's all right. That's fine. That's not a big issue or anything. But I do think it's causing some headaches, let's say, for some people. Now, first, let me start off by saying, look, I'm not perfect with this. It's taken me forever to change modular sets on the villains, right? For the longest time, the recommended one that they put in the parentheses, right? I always did what they said and I would never change it. And I've gotten more used to changing it nowadays. And honestly, it's made the game a lot better. It's made it a lot more fun. It makes some things more thematic and more interesting. Now, the reason I'm coming out with this video is because I've seen more and more online of people saying, I just don't want to mess up the pre-con decks because I'm afraid of making things worse. Or I want to still have original ideas, and so I don't want to use Marvel CDB, but the game's going to be too hard, right? It's not going to be good enough. They want to play with friends, and they want to make sure their friend has a good time, so they trust in just those pre-built decks. Now, here's the kind of the secret with those pre-built decks. 90% of them aren't very good. Like, they're not good at all. They're really there to kind of introduce new cards and maybe kind of like explore a bit of what the hero or maybe a trait type is trying to do in that set. But that's about it. That's about it. It's not high tuned. It's not super strong, generally speaking. There's a few precons that aren't too bad, but generally speaking, they're not very good. So it's highly recommended that you change those decks out probably as fast as possible. Now, I still think you should play the precon, right? Give it a try, give it a feel, let you get used to the new cards that are there, let you kind of experiment and play with them. But after that, it's kind of probably better to put them aside. And this is why I think true solo is so important for Marvel Champions. Like, I know there's still a lot of people that are like, I'll never play the game on true solo. It's too unbalanced. It's too this, it's too that, and whatever else they want to make excuses for. But I think the nicest thing about true solo is that you can test your decks out that you are trying to build yourself. And generally speaking, very generally speaking, if it works well in solo, it's probably going to work well in multiplayer as well. Maybe you have to adjust a few cards here and there, and that's okay. That's not the worst thing in the world. But generally speaking, you're probably going to be able to do all right with whatever deck you built. And the reason, because I've been thinking about this more and more and more, is why aren't people willing to jump into deck building or deck construction, really? Not even deck building. I shouldn't say deck building, deck construction. And I do think a big part of it is because a lot of people come from the board game side of things where you buy a board game, there's not too much to change, really. You just kind of set up how it's supposed to be set up, and that's it. And maybe you make adjustments during the game, but that's just really just like a play style difference, right? So if you think of like a dungeon crawler, let's say, where you get to add stats after you finish a dungeon or whatever, like generally there's not trade-offs with that. It's mostly just positive. It's which positive do you want to be? Do you want to be this positive or that positive? And that's about it. Certain games I really enjoy, like Endeavor, I can build out a board and change the pieces to it, but I'm not making huge significant trade-offs where if I go a certain route, all of a sudden it's going to be trash. I'm going to do terrible. Everything's going to be bad. That's generally speaking not what happens. Now, Marvel Champions, I think that is people's big fear is that they spend, all this time deck building, all this time setting up, all this time playing, and then it's just complete trash. And I get that. I get people's hesitation to that. I still recommend going to Marvel CDB, using the different, we've talked about this in a different video before, of how to improve upon your deck and build out decks from that, and then understand what the deck is trying to do, how it would work with how your player's play style is, and ways that you can improve it or change it to make it be how you want to be. Now, we've done that video talking about Marvel CDB decks before. Make sure to go check it out. But I think the same could be said for modular sets on villains. Now, again, I am as guilty as the next person with modular sets. I refused to do them for the longest time. I refused to change them. Whatever was in the parenthesis that it recommended, yeah, I was 100% for it. That's what I was going to do, and that's it. But I've learned over time that it really changes the game feel. It changes the gameplay. I know a lot of people say like, oh, you can make the difficulty of a villain a lot different by modular sets. I don't think you can make it that much more difficult, but you can make it more difficult. I think it's more incremental, and I'll get into how to make bigger jumps in a second, but it's more incremental. And I prefer it that way because we do have ways to make big jumps. Don't be afraid to mess around the modular sets, especially if you want to do something thematic. I think this is one of the great things about the Spider-Man set with Sinister Motives is that there's so many mod sets for the different villains that are out there. Well, they're really minions, but in the Spider-Man comics, they're villains. It's nice to be able to kind of plug them in every now and again and give yourself an extra challenge and an extra, thing to deal with. I think that's really cool. I think that wave in general did a really amazing job with that. So I'm a big fan of that, and I think it's definitely worth checking out and just even just doing it thematically, right? Even if you don't want to like worry about difficulty level, but just want theme to it, don't be afraid to mess with modular sets. It will definitely improve upon your game. And the last thing I want to talk about is the thing that I think a lot of people are afraid to do, but they really shouldn't be. Now, really quick before we get into that, do me a huge favor. Make sure to check out all the links down below. There's tons of ways to support this channel, either through Patreon or YouTube memberships, or if you have Amazon Prime, right, you can create an account on Twitch, link your Amazon account to the Twitch account, and you have a free Prime sub. It pays content creators real money, from Jeff Bezos's pocket to mine. Pays content creators real money, and it's highly appreciative. You probably already have one and you just don't know it. You don't have to give it to me. Just give it to any small content creator. You have to do it each and every month. Well, you don't have to, but each and every month you get a free Prime sub to give out. Give it out to your favorite content creators. A bunch of us that live stream over on Twitch. We really appreciate it. Twitch.tv/D20 Woodworking if you want to check me out. The live streaming community is really fantastic. It's really great. It's a great community to just hang out in. It's a great community to be a part of. So definitely give it a look. And like I said, if you want to support this channel on Patreon or YouTube memberships, check all that stuff. All the links are down below. There's a ton down there. Make sure to go through it all. All right, back to the video. One of the things that doesn't get talked about too much is people trying different standard or expert sets. And I feel like there's a lot of people that are super hesitant to jump to expert. And I get it. Expert can be kind of scary. It can be kind of a big jump. And I do think standard 3 is kind of a good bridge between standard 1 and expert 1. Because standard 3, generally speaking, for most villains, you're going to see your nemesis set faster, and most nemesis sets add a decent difficulty to the game. And so I think it's a good bridge between like going from standard 1 to expert 1. I do highly recommend players trying expert out. Even if you don't actually want to be like proficient in expert play, let's say you have no interest in like getting into expert, right? You have no interest in that. I still think you should try it. And the reason being is because you're going to learn how to be more efficient. You're going to learn how to calculate more that's on the table, because that's basically what we're all doing in Marvel Champions, is that we're just calculating like, okay, how much damage do I think he has left in his deck for like a boost icon flip up or scheming or whatever it may be. Okay, what's left in the deck that could be an advance or something like that. It's going to mess everything up, right? Like you're constantly figuring that out. And I feel like if you just play standard over and over, you don't get used to that as much. Where if you start playing expert, it seems like you start kind of thinking about those calculations a lot more. So I really highly recommend every now and again, not always, just trying expert. If you do it true solo, don't play Rhino. It's a trap. You're going to probably lose. It's really, really hard. Don't do it. But like Claw or someone like that, right? Absorbing Man, Taskmaster, these type of villains do really well, I think, on expert in true solo, where you're just trying to like learn the process to it, right? And there's no harm either of, again, switching out the modular set of Claw, let's say, to something much easier like Hope Summers, right? Hope Summers will give you a huge leg up if you have that, or putting Long Shot in, or maybe even the Power Stone. Power Stone might be iffy, but certain modular sets, right, will help you out, generally speaking. And I think it's worth making your life easier on the modular set side to get used to the expert side. But I know a lot of people are really hesitant because they're like, I'm just not interested in playing that part of it. But they're also stuck on standard because they feel like they're like really struggling and not learning like more of the game and not getting further along in that process. And I really, then just again, this is more of a personal thing. I really highly recommend getting into expert play at least a little, at least trying it, right? Just experimenting. And I think also it'll help you fine tune your deck a little bit, because you don't want any dead cards in your expert plays. You want to be as efficient with your hand as possible. And I think it's really going to just kind of help put you in that mindset. It's almost the same thing of what a lot of people who play sports or do anything competitively. It's the same thing. Like you're just practicing at a higher level so that when you go back down to your level, right, you're much better now. And a lot of people will say like, D20, how'd you get good? I guess I'm good at standard or whatever. It's because I play expert a fair amount, especially off stream. It's easier to play. So I played a fair amount, and I think that is what has really helped me become a better standard player. And also, I now know what cards are really good because really good cards will rise to the top when you're deck building for sure. So anyway, this whole long-winded video was just kind of I'm hopefully encouraging people that go out there and try different things in Marvel Champions. Again, I see, and I know like if you're just getting the Marvel Champions, it's kind of scary. You don't want to mess anything up, and I get it. But you can find all the pre-built deck lists online. So like even if you like messed up your deck and you're like, oh man, I just want to go back to the pre-build, like it was just so much better. It's online, or I think it's in most of the documents for the heroes. You can just put it back together, right? Don't worry about messing that up. But I do think it's worth just experimenting with. And the other reason I bring this up is because I do see some people, and I've seen a few posts now where people are saying that they're getting kind of bored of the game, right? They bought a bunch of stuff or they bought the things they're interested in, and it's just kind of like repetitive now. And my best guess, because sometimes people can probe this out of them and sometimes they don't respond to it, is that these people are not customizing the game at all. The game is meant to be customized. The game is meant to be changed a lot. That's actually what makes it so great, in my opinion. Now, other people might disagree with what makes it great, and that's totally cool. But for me, what makes this game so great is that you can customize so much of the game, that you can change so much of the game, and you can kind of make it your own little experience. And I think that's a really important part of the game that you should at least try, especially if you're getting bored. Now, this whole video, if you're playing through all the pre-build decks and you're playing through all the mod sets and standard and you're having the time of your life still and it's fantastic and everything's perfect, okay, like don't listen to most of this advice then, right? Like when you're ready and things start slowing down, you start getting kind of bored or it gets repetitive or whatever, maybe that'll never happen to you. And if not, that's really cool. That's really awesome, and I'm happy for you. But if it does start to happen, don't put the game aside. Instead, look at ways to change the game, because that is the beauty of this game. Most board games out there, there's not a lot of modularity, I guess, to the game. There's not a ton you can change. Marvel Champions, you can change like everything, and that's what's so fantastic about it. So anyway, I've been doing more of these kind of like rambling videos. Hopefully you don't mind them. Hopefully you've been enjoying them. They're just kind of fun to make, and allows me to practice like editing and shooting this kind of footage. So anyway, really appreciate the support. Thank you all so much. Make sure to hit the like button, subscribe, all that fun stuff, and I will see you all next time.